Israeli forces continue to violate the terms of a ceasefire agreement brokered by Egypt in November, which ended the 8-day war in Gaza. 6 Gazans have been injured since Friday by Israeli gunfire in the east of the coastal enclave. Most victims were farmers working on their land in the so-called buffer zone. It is the most fertile area in Gaza and makes up 30% of its arable land. According to health officials, Israeli forces have carried out 90 attacks since the start of the ceasefire.
The continuous violations made by the Israeli occupation are followed and observed by all the Palestinian factions, and all the Palestinian factions now are studying what are going to do after these violations, especially that these violations are continuous. They actually injured many people, and sometimes they killed some Palestinian people.
Pro-Palestinian international activists accused Israeli forces of committing crimes against Gazans.
There have been 86 injuries and 4 deaths since the ceasefire was announced on the 22nd of November. These are explicit violations of the ceasefire. These are crimes. They're ongoing. They're virtually every day at the moment. There was 2 more injured yesterday. There was 4 injured the day before.
The terms of the ceasefire agreement, which was signed by Hamas, the Islamic Jihad movement in Palestine, and Tel Aviv regime, require all sides to end any hostile actions against each other. Tel Aviv, however, has been carrying out attacks against people of Gaza since the truce came into effect. The Islamic Jihad movement in Palestine, who signed the ceasefire agreement, says resistance fighters are ready to respond to Israeli violations at any time.
The
ceasefire will be meaningless for us if the Israeli violations continue. Palestinian resistance fighters are ready to defend their people, and we hold the Israelis fully responsible for the violation of the ceasefire. We are also calling on Egypt to exert pressure on the Israeli enemy to stop the violations.
About 1.7 million people in Gaza have been suffering under a relentless Israeli blockade for several years. All this under the watchful eyes of the international community. And observers believe, in light of the Israeli violations, the November ceasefire agreement will not last for long. According to international activists, the Tel Aviv regime has been violating the ceasefire agreement on an almost a daily basis since it was brokered by Egypt. Ashraf Shannon, Press TV Gaza.
Israeli forces have stopped a Palestinian demonstration heading towards al-Arayis region of eastern Yatta and the occupied West Bank. The Palestinians were protesting the confiscation of their lands by Israeli settlers.
We have land here which was taken from us by the settlers. We want to protest the confiscation of the land that we inherited from our forefathers. Before we reached the land in al-Arayis, we found a group of Israeli soldiers who did not allow us to reach the land. They hit us and arrested several of us, including myself, my wife, and our baby daughter.
Israeli forces arrested 10 Palestinians as well as 4 Israeli peace activists and took them to a police center. All of the arrested Palestinians were released the same evening, except for a 31-year-old mother of 4.
They kept me in Kiryat Arba police station from 10 o'clock in the morning until 1 o'clock the next morning. And this baby was with me the whole time. During the interrogation, they did not let me breastfeed my baby and took her from me. From there, they took me to a jail in Jerusalem, and I had a nervous breakdown from there. Then I was moved to a hospital and back to prison.
The Awad family filed a lawsuit against settlers who colonized their land, in addition to occupation forces who accompanied them, in the so-called Israeli Higher Court in 1999, and supposedly won the lawsuit. But the settlers have continued to farm and build on the confiscated land.
Al-Arayis is land that belongs to Awad family. Settlers started an outpost here. First they started with one outpost and then went down the mountain to take the land there. Then they built greenhouses there. We have an order from the Israel court in removing the settlers and the greenhouse from our land from the 23rd of July 2011. But that decision was not implemented, and the settlers are the style expanded on our land.
Reem Ismail Awad was released after paying a 5,000 shekel fine and is scheduled for a court hearing in the Ofar military prison on the 22nd of October 2013. Since Israeli forces supposedly consider this land as a closed military zone, they prohibit the Palestinians from building here. The Israeli double standard in this case is that they allow settlers to build new outposts on the same land, which is owned by the Palestinians and confiscated by Israeli settlers. Israeli forces prevented a Palestinian humanitarian aid convoy from reaching impoverished Palestinian residents of the Jordan Valley on Saturday. The convoy aimed at delivering aid to Palestinian Bedouins who were severely affected by a storm that hit the region last week.
We were approximately 500 people, including youth, activists, Palestinian civil society organizations, and representatives of the private sector as well. And there were 5 truckloads of aid. We were surprised when we reached by an Israeli military checkpoint in Oja. They prevented us from entering the valley and claimed that it was a closed military zone.
The convoy was carrying winter outfits, tents, mattresses, food, blankets, and shoes for the impoverished Bedouin families, whose makeshift shelters were destroyed by the recent stormy weather.
The storm affected them in a very negative way, since Israel prevents them from building any infrastructure. They live in tents. The tents were destroyed by the storm. Their food, blankets, and just about everything they own was destroyed.
Since the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip in 1967, Israel announced that the Jordan Valley is under military law and declared it a closed military zone. Since then, Israel has outlawed the construction of any Palestinian infrastructure in the area, including the construction of houses, roads, and sewage networks.
There is none of any kind of services in that area, and that's why the Bedouin community remained as the biggest group of population in the Jordan Valley. Later, in the last 3 years, the occupation tried to evacuate these Bedouins, and they are trying to push them to live or to settle down in a special reservation in east of Bethlehem.
According to Palestinian experts, the aim of the occupation is to annex the Jordan Valley into Israel. Although Israel was successful in expelling other Palestinians from the area, they will not annex it until they banish the remaining Bedouin communities from the valley.
Originally, these Bedouins already are evacuated from Naqab in 1948 war. Then they moved to Hebron. Then they were forced to be evacuated again by the occupation army to Bethlehem. Then after that, they forced them to be distributed in all the West Bank.
The Palestinian Authority described banning the delivery of humanitarian aid by Israel as very dangerous measures. Since Israeli forces prevented humanitarian aid from reaching Palestinians in the Jordan Valley, organizers say that they are persistent in delivering the aid, and that it will reach the needy Palestinians regardless of the Israeli bloc on the Jordan Valley.
Demolished a number of buildings, including residential structures, in an early morning raid. 7 Palestinians were arrested and 9 injured as they tried to stop Israeli forces from destroying their homes. Israeli troops regularly demolish Palestinian homes using bulldozers against both urban houses and homes of farmers in the West Bank villages.
Well, there's certainly no surprise to continued ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in East Jerusalem. That's part of Netanyahu's right-wing agenda. At any rate, that has always been in the books for Likud, and you can go all the way back to Vladimir Jabotinsky. There's nothing surprising in the fact that they continue to pile up war crimes against the Palestinians. But what this once again signals and confirms is essentially the death of two-state solution, because not even taking into account all of the other aspects that would be required in order to build a viable and independent Palestinian state. The very fact that Netanyahu has moved, even at this point where there's no government really in session after the election, they're negotiating, the military continues to act either under orders from Netanyahu, who's not even leading any government, or on their own. Basically what it means is that if the Palestinians cannot have the capital of Al-Quds it means that there is no Palestinian state, and that means that the alternative is either some sort of one state, or as Jeff Halper, who's a director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolition in Israel, has said, either that or some sort of regional confederation. Now, what Netanyahu envisions, and what the settlers have envisioned, is one state. However, that's one state with the Palestinians living on reserves or Bantustans. Basically, that mirrors the type of process that happened to the indigenous peoples of North America. For example, here in Canada, we have a government that is stripping by legislation, stripping the native peoples here of territorial rights. So you end up with one state called Canada, but with native peoples living on reserves and essentially with no rights. And that is the vision that Netanyahu and the settlers have for the Palestinians. However, that's not going to fly. The Palestinians are not going to accept to be living in a state where they are third class, not even second class, third class citizens living on reserves in abominable conditions.
Apart from the 7 people that were arrested today by the Israeli forces, one of them we know is a researcher for an information center in Silwan, who was gathering information to document them about the events of today, the demolitions of the residential and other structures in the Silwan neighborhood. In the early morning hours, Israeli bulldozers moved in, supported by dozens of Israeli police and special units, to carry out the destruction of several structures in the Silwan neighborhood. The order was given by the Israel National Park Authority. They refer to it as a cleanup order, which added to the fury of the residents of Silwan neighborhood. The Israel Park Authority dealt with these structures as if they were trash, and this infuriated the residents of Silwan. Indeed, these structures served partly as residential. They were also extensions to other homes. The Israel Park Authority intends to develop this area into a national park, a Jewish national cemetery, an ancient Jewish national cemetery, which refers to it as a biblical cemetery as well. There's a lot of focus on Silwan neighborhood by the Israel Park Authority in different areas. Yeah. In one area they declared a place called the City of David over there, and they as a result they demolished a lot of structures over there and homes.
It really goes and get in the mindset of the settlers, the religious ones and the non-religious ones. Those just come there for the deal. And I mean, they don't even think about politics. For them, it's just buying and selling. And like, they told me that if someone is going to evict them, which they don't believe, but if it was going to happen, they're going to even make more money because the government will pay them compensations for this.
Israel is breaking its own rules on the use of deadly force against unarmed protesters. That's according to an Israeli rights organization.
This report exposes for the first time the full list of crowd control weapons used by the Israeli security forces in the West Bank regarding Palestinian demonstrations. Weapons like tear gas, rubber-coated bullets, the skunk, stun grenades.
B'Tselem has said Israeli forces have killed at least 56 people since 2005 in clashes with barely armed Palestinians. The NGO has accused Israeli security forces of extensively and systematically violating rules that bar deadly retaliation for non-lethal assault. Based on those rules, live ammunition should not be fired at protesters. Over the past 2 weeks alone, Israeli forces have shot dead 2 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank in protests, which Tel Aviv fears are the beginning of a third uprising known as the
Israeli government is using violence and killing Palestinian civilians. But I have to recognize that I was surprised that this report came from a right-wing organization in Israel. You know, BT Selim, that it's right-wing and calling for human rights. When the Human Rights Watch organization remained silent, and any other human rights organization in the international community did not criticize Israel. But now this report came from Israel, from inside Israel. Like we said in Arabic, we have a witness from the family, shahada shahidun min ahlihi. But personally, I think that Israel will continue to use violence against Palestinians because the right-wing government after the election will use this, and as you said also, that Israel fears another intifada among the Palestinian people. Also, I have to comment about the number of victims. They said they were talking about 56 victims. They did not talk about hundreds of Palestinians injured by, for example, many Palestinians lost their eyes when they used rubber-coated metal bullets, and how many Palestinians, you know, also became handicapped, and many Palestinians also were killed by gas, using the gas, you know, against them. So all this behavior made, you know, is usual by what has been always usual by the Israeli authority. It will continue, but to have a criticism from a right-wing Israeli organization, it's, in my opinion, a good sign. It may encourage the other organization for human rights in the world to move also, because they have been always afraid when they criticize the Israeli government to be, you know, accused to be anti-Semitic, for example. Now it's a good sign, in my opinion, and we have to continue and to watch this kind of criticism. And it's normal that the Israeli government will deny all those crimes against Palestinian civilians.
In recent years, Israel and Egypt have accused Salafi Jihadi groups from Gaza of being behind attacks carried out along the Sinai border between the two countries.
Talks about jihadi groups in Gaza is an Israeli excuse to give Gaza a bad name. This topic was discussed among all Palestinian factions recently. There is an agreement among all factions to abide by the truce, which was declared after the Israeli 8-day war in Gaza last November. Israel has always given the impression that Sinai is a territory that is controlled by jihadi groups. Sinai is under Egypt's sovereign control.
During this press conference, panelists said that Gaza is part of the Palestinian national project, and stability in the seaside territory is important for the stability of the whole region. This is while both rival factions, Hamas and Fatah, stress the need to have one authority in Gaza under the umbrella of the PLO and speed up the implementation of the national reconciliation in order to help Gazans stand on their feet and build their lives after years of siege, division, and two devastating wars.
What I understand is that we need one authority. We need Palestinian unified authority. Should be one weapon, one project. Everyone who wants to express about himself or his presence, it should be in a democratic way through the election boxes.
Gaza is part of Palestine, and there will not be a Palestinian state without Gaza. Therefore, we are serious about achieving national unity and reconciliation. And we need to reconstruct the PLO and its institutions. And until we achieve that, we will continue to rebuild Gaza.
There is no hope for Gaza except to be a part of the Palestinian state, and the unity between Gaza and the West Bank should be achieved as soon as possible.
After the 8-day war, several prominent foreign ministers from the region visited Gaza and were received by the Hamas governing authorities, thus undermining the long-standing Israeli effort to isolate Hamas and exclude it from participation in diplomacy.
I believe that Hamas is capable of controlling Gaza and is aware about the activities of Salafi jihadi groups. I believe that these groups realize that they cannot compete with Hamas, and therefore they are not active anymore. and they now abiding by the national consensus. Israel has always wanted to separate Gaza from the rest of occupied Palestinian territories and annex it to Egypt. This is part of the Israeli project. That's why it has closed all crossings with Gaza. Therefore, Egypt understood this game and will push both sides, Fatah and Hamas, to reconcile in order to prevent Israel from forcing Egypt to annex Gaza.
Unlike the ceasefire after Operation Cast Lead 4 years ago, the Gaza ceasefire agreement declared last November between Hamas and Israel under Egyptian mediation has a significance beyond ending 8 days of relentless Israeli attacks. It is just possible that it will be looked back upon as a turning point in the longest struggle between Israel and Palestine. Many observers believe that this time the ceasefire will hold, as both Israel and Hamas are interested in calm, as both claim they have achieved power of deterrence.
Many Palestinians also believe that nothing positive can be expected from the Israeli occupation, regardless of who is ruling.
I think that the Israeli elections do not carry any changes on the future of Palestinians. The Israeli occupation had a war on Gaza in 2008 when a centrist party was ruling, and another war in 2012 when a rightist party was ruling. I don't expect any change, as they are all sides of the same coin.